Consistency matters.
Sure.
Consistency, what we call frequency. We want,
Yep.
we want, I think the shipper wants the same thing, the carrier wants the same thing, which at the end of the day is consistency.
Yep.
I think the shippers that go out and try and award lanes that are less than 50 loads a year,
Is that your threshold? I'm curious because shippers and
50.
carriers have very different perspectives.
50. If it doesn't move once a week, there's no consistency to it.
Yeah, most shippers, their line is 26.
There you go.
And I agree. 50 makes more sense. I remember talking to guys at Schneider, and they want 100.
What would you say if a shipper was looking for 2-year pricing?
I'd say just build a mechanism in every 6 months, every quarter, at least once within the midpoint to adjust the rates. Either way, or tie it to an index, tie it to the DAT index or CAS or something to do it. And in fact, I'm not a favor of index-based pricing at the quarterly level, like a adjustable rate mortgage.
Right.
I'm more of a fan of it being real time, load by load index pricing, which now the technology's out there. We all have pricing models, real time ones. And so have an agreement where that goes rather than adjusting it every 3 months or 6 months for the future period, because then you're either leading or lagging the trend.
Right. Well, how do you build consistency with that?
There is no consistency to an index.
There's not.
Consistency to an index.
Yeah. So here's what some companies do. They say, okay, I will guarantee I cover this capacity. Let me look at your historical buying pattern, shipper.
Right.
And I look at that, compare that to an index. Let's say it's DAT's index. And I notice that you always buy 4% above DAT, right? They say, okay, I will guarantee coverage and whatever the DAT rate is for that lane on that day, I will charge you 4% above it, because that index will move with the market. But that carrier knows they can always buy capacity below DAT, right? And so therefore it's fixed. The relationship, it matters. We all trust the index, and then you let the market take care of it. And this is for the onesie twosie lanes. You don't do this for your power lane, but for the ones where you don't spend all the time. To me, that's where the future's going. Because we have better modeling and we can come up with rates really quickly and we can have trust. The technology's there, API connectivity is there. We just have to get overcome the people being nervous about the machine agreeing on the rate.
Well, that's a major change from what the industry was 10 years ago.
Absolutely. Because TMSs were idiots for the longest period of time. All the expertise was in creating the bid. And then you have this routing guide, which is a wood chipper, it wasn't very smart. It's saying this lane, this carrier. And now you're getting much more intelligence down at the execution side. But I think I cut you off, Joe. I'm sorry.
Have you seen any improvements in the quality of data that shippers give? I know sometimes shippers would just give a bunch of crap out there and they'd get crap rates. I mean, with all the technology, with all the improvements in analysis and data management and decision support, you see better data coming out of the shippers now?
I think you do. I haven't run a bid in a little while, but talking to some of the people who do, like at Chainalytics, Kevin Zweier, who's Mr. Bid,
Right.
I think it can be. It depends on how much effort the shipper wants to put in. Also, you can get what's known as an overfitting problem. I could give you the perfect information of what happened last year. It's not a guarantee that same thing will happen, the seasonality and things. And so that's the challenge that you have. How much information? You can give a ton of information, but then the carrier's stuck with it. To your point, John, some of these carriers are still doing stuff on spreadsheets, right? And so if you give them all this data, they don't know how to process it. It's a challenge.
I think it's a challenge. I think depending on what you're doing, who your clientele is, what you're manufacturing, for a Pepsi or Coca-Cola or somebody like that, they can pretty much guarantee volumes
on certain lanes.
Consistencies in most lanes. Yeah, that, toilet paper, okay? We know there's X number of Americans in the United States. The average person uses this much toilet paper. We're going to have this many loads of toilet paper.
Yeah, it didn't work during the pandemic now, though, did it? Because the channels changed.
Right.
The channels changed and
Therefore, the transportation changed.
Right. But
Same thing with beverages. Beverages, it takes 6 trucks to give the same amount of soda for the bag in a box versus cans. So it totally changed things. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
So but I think COVID is an anomaly.
Yeah, so was 2017, 2018.
Right. So,
So was every cycle's an anomaly, except it
right.
happens every 3 years or so.
Well, and when, 20 years ago, it was 5 and 7 year cycles. Now they're getting closer.
So that's the
They're,
question. Is our cycles going to happen faster, more steep? I don't know. I don't know. We're seeing this because right now, the last three cycles, if you look at the slope of the rates going up for contract, match the inverse of the slope going down.
correct.
Steeper up, steeper down.
Steeper up, steeper down, more
It's
often,
happening.
more volatility. So, and I think some of that is because of technology. I mean,
Yep.
let's be realistic. 20, 30 years ago, the freight would have all been moved that was moved during COVID, but it would have been moved differently. It wouldn't have been on a spot market and a TMS tool. It would have been relationship based. It all would have moved, but it would have been a different task. It would have happened differently. We wouldn't have the data that necessarily that we have now, and that, like for you, for a DAT.
But John, I still agree that it's a relationship business. But when I got
Exactly.
it in the 90s, it was a different kind of relationship. There were a lot of steak dinners and tickets and golfing going on for the relationship. Right
Yeah.
now, I think it's more, there's still some of that stuff going on, obviously, but it's more what can you do for me as a business, not what can you do for me as an individual in the
Yeah.
procurement side. That's a big change that I've seen.
I agree. I don't golf, and
I bet there are people in your company that do.
I think there are people in every company that golf.
Absolutely.
So for
And
whatever
hopefully you don't
they're
make a business decision based on a golf game, but
exactly, or a steak, right?
yeah.
Um,
Unless it's a really good steak, you never know.
no steak is good enough.
I don't
So,
know.
well, I guess I'm going to have you make me a steak so we can learn what this is. So, let me keep going here because I'm enjoying the conversation. Do you see? I think maybe with the big shippers, they might jump in the dynamic scenario. But that brings me to my next subject: budgeting.
Sure.
With that said, you're putting together a budget. Now, we know that COVID happened and no one had a budget for that. There was no
Okay.
budget for that. So
Well, they had a budget, it just got blown.
it got
Everyone has a
imploded.
budget.
Right. It was done the first quarter for the year. So how do you budget and
Yeah, here's
do
the
what
thing.
you used to do?
We're doing project with this right now up at MIT with C.H. Robinson. They're a longtime sponsor of a lot of research we do up here. Steve Rates, we've been working with him for a decade. We're actually presenting at CSCMP talking about this. And so the idea that you had a budget in your routing guide, the output of your RFP as your budget was false, right? Every year we made money doing bids in the 90s because we'd take the output of an auction and compare it to what you actually spent. And lo and behold, we saved money every time because the routing guide failures were comparing a blue sky to what actually happened. And so the idea that your RFP creates your budget was a fallacy anyway. And so now if you recognize that, you look for where the uncertainty happens, the low volume lanes, you look at those and you can do two things. You can find the frequency that it'll fail, and then you can estimate what the market will be, the up rate. If you have an estimate of a history and seeing how far you go back into your routing guide, third, fourth, you can map what that does so you can create a range. And so you can have your dedicated, you know that price pretty well. Your contract, you can kind of set that up. But then for spot, you just set up a range based on the probability of failure and the probability of what you see the market doing. So it can be done. It's getting a CFO to agree to a variable, kind of uncertain budget is a challenge. It's a challenge.
And I think that was where I was headed, and that's where I'm steering. You see some open thought now after COVID, right? But I don't think everyone's comfortable to adopt the
Sure.
open budget. And if I say, hey, you know what?
Sure.
Here's all of our money. Chris, you get all your money and you put it in the bowl, and I'm going to put all my money in the bowl. We're going to ride this together.
Fuel. How do you budget your fuel?
Fuel rides the weekly national average.
So should your spot rates. For those small
Should.
15% of your volume, which is 80%, 60% of your lanes, that's what I'm saying will float. And so that's the piece that's uncertain. So I can put it just like you can't predict fuel, but you can get a range. You do the same thing for those lanes for the spot. It's another source of uncertainty.
Let's budget for this. Let's award and budget a lane that is a multi-stop lane that is different every week. We put different loads together.
Different animal.
Yes.
Different animal. When you talk about multi-stop, you're talking almost less. You're doing LT. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we see that being compared with DAT numbers.
So you can budget for your dedicated because that's pretty much your fixed contract, right?
Right.
Then you've got your contract rates where on your higher volume lanes, let's say one a week, that's probably not going to go away. You don't see that much variability there. You might see some, but you can budget those. I'm talking about the 60% of your lanes that carry less than 20% of your volume. That's where your uncertainty lies. So it's not the 100%, it's 20% of your volume is probably going to be variable.
So you're going to leave that variable dynamic.
Yes, that's my recommendation as best you can, because it's going to be dynamic anyway. The routing guide will fail on a load that goes once every third month.
Right.
It'll fail.
It will.
It'll go to spot market
fail.
anyway.
Yep, it'll be on the spot market, and the lower cost bidders won't take it until it gets up to the point that, like you said, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh down the line, they're going to nab it, and that's going to be what you pay anyway.
Yep.
So at the end of the day,
that's the thought. It's going to be dynamic anyway, so why go through the effort? And it cuts the amount of lanes on a bid in half.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a win for everyone if that is the play.
Well, multi-stop loads shouldn't be in an RFP. They should be. That's a separate animal.
Totally.
You got to separate those. Yeah.
Especially,
you're right, Chris. It's more like LTL.
Yeah, if the routes change, I mean that's last mile, and so that's different. When I talk about truckload, it's a middle mile thing, right? But if your stops change every time, that's a different kind of model. That's almost dedicated.
Yeah.
Very good. I agree.
There we go.
But I can tell you, I work with a lot of shippers that don't agree. Because that
sounds like a personal problem, John.
Exactly. I need you come over here and teach me how to golf and show me what a good steak's worth. We have tried to avoid both extremes. You don't want to be the low and you don't want to be the high, and you want to bring that consistency and value to your shippers, which I think is a value and recognized maybe more so now post-COVID. But they're still struggling because if they got hit here and I wasn't involved with them, they're trying to get it back.
Absolutely. A lot of clawback. We look at the new rate differential, we call it. We can identify a rate coming in and what rate it's specifically replaced, right? Not just on average, just each rate. And we can look at that, and it was running negative double digits, 12%, 15% for dry van and temp control. It's now into the mid to high single digits, but they're still recovering rates, and rates are still way above the 2019 at the contract level. Spot's weird. It's below.
Yeah, it's unsustainable.
But so right now, if you look at the average contract rate out dry van, it's about a 6.4% compounded annual growth rate from Q1 2020, start of the pandemic, to now. So it's kind of returned back. And historically, before that, it was about a 3 to 4% compounded annual growth rate for the rates, kind of inflation. So we've doubled that, but still, it's back down. And that's why I think we're kind of hitting that. We're plateauing out, I think.
I would agree. I think we're now starting to see what the new norm might look like moving forward.
Yep. We'll see.
Barring hurricanes.
Something will happen.
Events will
trigger the next trend.
Yeah. And I think from this point, it's probably only going to go up. It's just when, I think, from this point.
We'll see.
Well, gentlemen, number one, thank you for the
anytime
enjoyable banter back and forth. I love it.
Well, I enjoyed talking with you, though, John. Good seeing you again, Joe.
Hey, enjoy you, Chris. Thank you for the time.
Same here, Chris.
Thanks.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you, guys.
So long.